Okay, so here I am. I am actually speaking today. So we are here visiting with Mr. V, brought to you by Chronicalization Video. And I am not only the guest, but I am also the MC today, Daryl. And we have Silent Brian in the corner. God took away his ability to speak overnight, and he can't say a word. So we're just going to do this anyway. Why not? Yeah, this isn't the Today Show, so we'll just muddle through. So today we're going to be talking about Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn was a huge star in the 50s and 60s. She had actually kind of an interesting childhood, interesting early life. She was born in Belgium to like titled parents, wealthy royalty, I guess you call them. And so she grew up in wealth and a nice life. She actually traveled. I guess apparently her parents divorced when she was fairly young, and she lived in Belgium and also a lot in England, and thus she had a beautiful English speaking voice. She had a bit of a British accent, I believe, but for someone who grew up in Belgium most of her life, she spoke really good English. And so she was used to traveling and everything. She went to school in England. There's an interesting thing that is kind of a unfortunate happenstance, but without getting into too much history, World War I was really rough in England and in France, and Belgium remained neutral. So when World War II comes along, her mother is thinking the last war, and Audrey Hepburn actually was in England at the beginning of the war, and her mother said, "We don't want to be in England, we want to be in Belgium, it's safer." So she brought her to Belgium. And Belgium was, is an occupied territory, and so it wasn't. She survived it, but she would have been much more comfortable in Britain. There are stories that she was engaged in the underground and the resistance movement. I think maybe some of that may be a little embellished. She was, she would have been 14 when the war started and 16 when it ended, so she's very young. But apparently she had some ties to the resistance, and I think she may have done some small favors for them or so. And maybe I'm not giving her enough credit. I don't know, but it's what I've read is that she was maybe involved in that, but she was, like I say, she was 14, 15 years old, very young kid. So she went back to England after the war and started taking dancing lessons. And she was very malnourished during the war. You'd imagine the Belgium occupied territory probably did not get the food that the Germans probably took the food from themselves. So she was malnourished and so forth. Went to Britain. She wanted to be a dancer, and she couldn't really do it. They actually, I guess, because of her malnourishment, they said that she's not going to do it. So she turned to acting. She started on a stage and then did a couple small, it's actually kind of a meteoric rise. She goes from a waif in the war to the post-war. She goes back, finishes school, I guess, tries to become a dancer. Someone sees her. She's a pretty girl. She gets into a couple of small movies in Britain. I saw her in the Lavender Hill Mob, 30-second shot, pretty girl in a bar kind of thing. And someone saw her. They liked her. She did one movie, I guess, in Britain, and then she came to America, and William Wyler saw her, who was a very top-notch, well-known director for the movie Roman Holiday. And he was actually going to cast, or wanted to cast, Elizabeth Taylor, but he kind of went on a limb and took a chance because, she was just unknown. First major movie role, and she made her international star, made her the biggest thing in the world, and she won an Academy Award for this performance. And so it's like, that's just overnight sensation. So this is scenes from Roman Holiday. Basically, the story in a nutshell is she's a princess. She's on a European junket, not junket, but tour, and she's kind of saddled with all the what you get from what you understand with the life of royalty is they sit around and do nothing, but they have a lot of people telling them what to do all the time, and a lot of pressures, and a lot of you have to do this, and you have to do the right thing, and you got to be at lunch at 1:00, and you got an opening over here at 3, and
Decency. 1:00 sharp, lunch with the foreign
no time to have
minister.
fun.
You will wear your white lace and carry a
This is
bouquet
the scene.
of very small pink roses.
And she's told what to eat, told what to do all the time. And so basically she sneaks out in the middle of the night. And she runs into Gregory Peck, who is actually a journalist. And I believe at the beginning he doesn't realize who she is. And so they hook up. Oh, he finds her sleeping on a park bench because she has nowhere to go. And so he takes pity on her and brings her back to his flat. And there's a good little comedy bit here. I don't know if it's going to show it, where this bit with the stairs is kind of funny. So she goes on the outside. I mean, I look at that and go, that's Buster Keaton. That's old silent movie kind of stuff. And so he takes her upstairs, puts her to bed, takes care of her. And then they just sort of have fun. They get on a moped and wander around Rome, and it's just this important person enjoying the simple joys of life. And there is one thing is I think I mentioned in my book that at this time Italian neorealism was really a big deal. Rossellini and Fellini and De Secca were making these films on the streets of Italy, really using common people, really just down in the streets, and they call it neorealism. So I think this film was inspired by a lot of that. I think he wanted to. I think I don't know. I guess Italian culture was a big deal at the time, and it really did help to influence a lot of this, even though it's not neorealism. It is. I think it's filmed in Rome, but it's an American production. It's not the gritty Rossellini kind of film. So they go on. He kind of figures out who she is. I don't believe. Did you watch this week, Brian? I don't believe he knows who she is, right? For like 3/4 of the film, right? Half the film. So he's just kind of like this young, cute girl, and he's kind of taking her around. And then he kind of figures out who she is, and there's a little thing of should she go back to her life or should she leave, and she ends up making the right decision, going back to her life, and it's a bittersweet ending to this film. Yeah. So, but you could even just see in this trailer, she's just cute. She's very small and lithe, but there's something about her. I mean, just physically, she's beautiful, but there's something about she just radiates this kind of innocence and sexuality, but not in a different way, but the innocence and just beauty. She just comes off as a beautiful person. I was going to make a note of this, that particularly in the next film, she was active. She was really big at the same time as Marilyn Monroe, and it's sort of an interesting juxtaposition because they're two really almost opposite people, right? It's like Marilyn Monroe is very sexual and very sultry and very over the top, where Audrey Hepburn is very lithe, very physically, very slender, and her sexuality is, I think, it's much less. It's much less. It's more restrained, which doesn't make it less sexual, but it makes it much, So it's kind of it's a big world, right? And we can have both sides of the the coin there. He brings up our our contributor on the web. Bringing up an interesting point. This film was written by Dalton Trumbo, who had right before that been blacklisted. So he was no longer able to work in Hollywood because he wasn't convicted. He was accused of having socialist ideology. What do you call? He was favorable to it. So he was blacklisted. So he could not work. Well, he kept working through the 50s and did many different things. They had the system where they call it a front, where I guess it was somebody who was a writer, but maybe not kind of a hack writer, kind of a guy struggling writer. So they gave him the script, or he put his name on it, and the script ends up winning an Oscar. And I read the story about the guy who won the Oscar. He, trotted up there and got the award and thanked his agent, thanked his wife, and did the whole thing. And apparently never. I mean, he had the award. He was grateful for it. And apparently, what happened was he was not willing to ever admit to anything. He never said, "Yeah, you're right. I didn't do it. It was Dalton's work." And so it kind of just lasted that way. And so it was actually in the 70s, I believe it was, that they finally acknowledged that Dalton Trumbo was the writer, and posthumously at that time actually gave his family the trophy. And I don't know whatever happened to the other guy, but he, that trophy, the guy that the fake trophy, that trophy would be worth a fortune, wouldn't it? Because given to the guy who was not was a fake, right? And so I'm sure his family has it somewhere, and Grandpa won an award. Anyway, yes. Lastly, so Edith Head. Edith Head. She was a costume designer. She did the costumes for this. I don't know what to say. The thing about her is I looked her up one time. She's one of those people, if you look up on IMDb, 400, 500 credits. Just phenomenal. Just went on. Back in the studio days, I think she worked for Paramount. Just, probably did 5 or 6 or 10 movies a year, just bang them out. She was active into the 80s. In fact, I remember this in my book. There's a movie in the 80s called Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which is an old retro film. So they're all wearing 50s, 40s, 50s garb in this film in the, I think it's 80s, maybe 90s even. At the very end of the movie, in memoriam Edith Head. She had actually done the costumes for that movie way, like I say, 80s or 90s, and she had died, I guess, after the production. And so they were acknowledging her. She goes back to the 30s. You almost name a famous movie. She did the costumes for it. It's phenomenal. Eddie Albert later on was in. It's really helpful to be fed. It is. Eddie Albert, he was later in Green Acres in the 60s. He was actually a very good actor, but I think you saw it in the trailer, he was a photographer with the beard, and he did a really good job as the supporting actor. One more note on this. I want to move on to the next one. I said that Audrey did get an Academy Award on this film, but very first major film, she was her name was above the title, and above the title is a big deal. Excuse me, it's a big deal. That means that you are a star. It means you're a major actor. And so the story I just read was that they were going to have Gregory Peck, who was a big star, above the title, and then some sort of, which they used to often do, introducing Audrey Hepburn. And Gregory Peck actually said, you need to put her name above the title because she's going to be a huge star. And she's going to actually, the quote I read was something along the lines of, she's going to become a major star, and then I'm going to look like a jerk because my name's above the title and hers isn't. So, yeah, so she's above the title on her very first, not her first film, but first major film. All right, so let's move along to the other one, which is this is her iconic role, Breakfast at Tiffany's. This is the film that she's I think most known for. If you go Google Audrey Hepburn, you'll see images and photographs of her in gowns from this film, particularly the black dress at the beginning, I believe, and that big hat is huge. So this one is based on I don't know if it's a short story or maybe it's considered a novella. It's a short fiction from Truman Capote. And if you have not read Truman Capote, I can't recommend him highly enough. He's a fantastic writer. This is written from the first. It's written in the first person from this guy who's a writer who moves to New York City, and he's writing, working on his novel, and in the film he lives upstairs from this woman. And so they, and I'll give you a little hint, in the fiction, in the book, the story, he's gay. And so I heard that I heard two things that Capote said about this. Was he wasn't happy with the way they changed his story, and that he wanted his good friend Marilyn Monroe in the title role. And boy, it's one of those things where you hear about the alternatives and you just can't quite picture it. She would have done a good job. Marilyn Monroe is a good actress, and she could have done this role, but holy mackerel. I guess I look at it like what would we have missed if we didn't have Audrey Hepburn in this role, because she's just fantastic. So basically, he's living upstairs with her. He is I think he's a writer, and she has these parties downstairs. So he keeps kind of going downstairs and getting caught up in her life. She's Holly Golightly is her name, which is a fake name, of course. But she's basically a person who is I don't know. She's really a prostitute, is really what she is. It's never quite plainly said. In the movie, it can't really be said in those days. And I don't believe in the book. It's been so long since I've read it, but I don't believe it's really quite mentioned that explicitly. But maybe she's a kept woman, maybe is the way you would put it. But she has a lot of friends, and everyone loves her, and so they congregate in her apartment, and she has all these deals with all these different men. The gag in the movie is that she gets $50. She goes out to dinner with men, and they give her $50 when she needs to go to the powder room. Whatever the hell that means. I have no idea what that means. Anyway, so it's I believe it's pretty much all shot on the back lots. It's none of it. I mean, do you think so? You think it's on location? In New York is beautiful in this movie, and it's very a warm. The lighting is very warm, and it's very beautiful cinematography and set production. But that's why I thought it was actually filmed in Hollywood on a back lot. But maybe they she's throwing a coke in the ladies' room. You know that. I don't know. I thought that the streets where she lives and stuff were on the back lot. Anyway, the point is, it's very beautiful, but I don't know what to say about it. It's one of those movies. There's not a ton of plot. It's kind of a character development. She meets is it a Brazilian prince or something like that, and she gets excited, and he's money bags, and so she's going to marry him and move off to Brazil, and she's just mercenary. She wants his money. She's also mixed up in this scheme where she's getting paid every week to go visit this old kindly man in prison, and tells him the weather report. And so she talks to a guy and he tells her what to tell him, and she goes and tells this guy, and it turns out that the old guy in prison is a mobster, and so she's unwittingly giving messages to this mobster, and then that kind of gets her. I mean, so that creates a kerfuffle. And then there's actually a thing where she's going to move off to Brazil, but she may be under indictment and all this kind of stuff going on. And then about that time, Buddy Ebsen, who is obviously much more famous as Jed Clampett in Beverly Hillbillies, he shows up, and he's kind of hanging around. And George Peppard, who is her friend, her kind of love interest, he's like, "Who are you? And what's going on here? And you're following her." It's his. Oh, George Peppard is the A-Team. Yeah, these guys all sold out for television later in their careers. So anyway, so it's George Peppard. That's when you get to the real crux of the story. What's her name? Do you remember her name? You can look it up for me real quick. Billy Joe, Mary Jane. It's actually this old man, Buddy Ebsen, is her husband. And she's from, I don't know if they ever quite specified, down south somewhere. Okay, you have to find the name for me, because anyway, she's actually a simple country girl. She grew up in the South. Connie? That doesn't sound right. Really? I thought it was Mary Jane or Billy Joe or something like that. Okay, anyway. So she was a simple country girl. Grew up in the South, married to this old guy. I mean, he must be twice her age. And he was just a simple working man, and a simple life, having a simple life. And I believe she even had kids, and she just couldn't take it. And so she escaped from the doldrums, the humdrum, simple life of the South. Lula May. I knew it was something like that. Lula May. Yeah, poor Lula May. And you look at Audrey Hepburn, and you're like, man, I don't see Lula May in there. But that's the whole point, is that she's this simple country girl, married this old farmer or working man, whatever he was, and she just couldn't take it, and she completely changed her whole persona, moved to New York, must have changed her voice because she has the Audrey Hepburn kind of, I guess you'd probably call it the transatlantic accent, but kind of a mildly British accent, but kind of a sophisticated accent. So she would have had to change her the way she speaks, gets the black dress, and very American story, and starts charging men to go to the ladies' room, and then creates this whole other life. But it's all a facade. The whole thing's a facade, and she can't really. She doesn't really have a life. She doesn't really have a persona. She doesn't really know who she is. The cat, whose name is Cat, she doesn't want to burden the cat with a name. So the cat is a simple, it's kind of a metaphor for an unanchored, if you will, person or entity. And so she doesn't want to own this cat. She doesn't want to possess it. She doesn't want to give it a name, but she needs that cat around. And so at the pivotal point, the cat runs off and she can't deal with it. She needs that affection. She needs that connection to somebody else. And so the cat is kind of this metaphor, I guess, for connection between people. And she's running away, and and so George Peppard in the end, if you can find that scene in the end, they find the cat in an alley, and they embrace in the rain. And I just realized that there's that scene you showed from Roman Holiday of her in the rain, and there's the climactic scene in this film. The very, very last scene, there's the cat who just kind of wanders around through life and is not really attached to anything, just like she is. There she is with her cigarette holder. Look at that cigarette holder. It's a foot and a half long. That's great. So then, yes. Sexy and those are wet women. Yeah. Okay, I'll let that one go, but that one's good. So yes, there's Henry Mancini, who was a major orchestra leader, composer, I guess, in those days. He did a lot of movie scores and stuff. Henry Mancini, I think, was Frank Sinatra's main, I believe that's true, Frank Sinatra's main orchestra leader. He did a lot of movies. And so he wrote this. I don't believe he wrote this film, this song. I want to say it's the other guy, Johnny Mandel. I don't know. See, I don't have anybody to fact check me here, so I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here. Anyway. There's the song Moon River, which is a beautiful ballad. It's actually a very pretty Johnny Mandel. So, but Henry Mancini, I believe, did the score of this film. Anyway, so there's a scene early on where Audrey Hepburn is sitting on the roof of her apartment, sitting outside I think it's on the roof or on the fire escape of her apartment. I think it's even a ukulele, or is it a guitar, singing this song Moon River. And that music goes all the way. Johnny Mercer, that's who I was looking for. Johnny Mercer, not Mandel. So that song goes all the way through the film. It's a beautiful song. It adds to the kind of the bittersweet, melancholy mood of this film. It really is kind of a sad film, even though it's beautiful, and it's kind of just gives you, I don't know, it's kind of bittersweet in the end. To be honest with you, I don't remember how the novella ends. It does not end like the film because she does not fall in love with the gay guy upstairs. But in the end, she finally attaches herself to George Peppard. I left out the whole subplot of George Peppard is also kind of a kept man with he has a girlfriend, a wealthy woman, and so forth. Moon River and Me. There's one other thing that you brought up here that it ran off the. I want to say something. Oh, Blake Edwards. So Blake Edwards was the director of this. Blake Edwards. This was probably a little. I want to say this is not a typical Blake Edwards film. He did. He was most famous for Pink Panther films. He did a lot of comedies. More. I felt like he did more broad comedies. I believe he did a film called. Well, I shouldn't even say that because I'm not sure. But anyway, Pink Panther was his thing. He did later on. He did Victor Victoria with his wife. He was married for a long time to Julie Andrews. And I think he did Victor Victoria, and he actually did a movie that I liked in the 80s called S.O.B. S.O.B. Yeah, with William Holden. It's actually a pretty funny movie. But anyway, this was not probably really typical Blake Edwards, but this movie is just on so many levels really a good movie. Like I think Brian agreed with me that it is a beautiful film. It's there's a mood to it all the way through that just kind of permeates this thing. And Audrey Hepburn, this is kind of her pinnacle, and she's always going to be kind of associated with this. Operation Petticoat, is that Blake Edwards? Okay, but see, that's a much more broad comedy. That's a much more almost slapstick, as I recall. That's the one with the pink submarine, right? With not Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, I think. Yeah, but that's Cary Grant. Okay, yeah, that's a much more broad comedy. So, adding to the list, I have to say, I was looking at her credits. She does not have a million film credits. She only did maybe about 40 movies. And I have to say, these are kind of it for me. Charade. Well, okay. Strike that. My Fair Lady is one of my favorite films. I love My Fair Lady. And the thing about My Fair Lady is they did not let her sing. They didn't trust her to sing. I mean, My Fair Lady is a Broadway musical, and Julie Andrews did it on Broadway, and so it had that pedigree expectation. So people who knew at that time, you'd seen the play, the movie comes out, you have this expectation for great Broadway talent. And they didn't want Julie Andrews to do it because she wasn't a big enough name in movies. So they picked Audrey Hepburn, but they didn't want her to sing. So I believe they used the famous, is it Marnie Dixon or Nixon? I think Marnie Nixon, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, they used someone else to sing all the songs, but she was fantastic in her role. She does the Cockney accent, and she's just Marnie Nixon. She did a lot of movies where she sang the music, sang the songs. Anyway, so those three movies of hers I really like. She's fantastic in My Fair Lady. Charades is all right. It's fun. It's cool with Cary Grant. It's all right. Funny Face, I think, was kind of cute. The one, she's blind. Wait Until Dark. That's actually pretty good. That actually gave her a little bit of range. It's it's a drama. It's a blind woman who's being stalked by a serial killer, I believe, something like that. So it's kind of dangerous and on edge of your seat, suspenseful. She does a really good job in that one. But I gotta say, after that, that's kind of it's there's not a lot left. She did. I should also mention real quick. She acted on stage a lot. I think she had 2 Tonys, I believe, or at least one. So she was quite a good actress on stage. And yes, she was in a movie in I think the early '90s called Always, which was a remake of a '40s movies called something about Joe. It's called crap. Anyway, it's actually about it's about a guy who dies. It's about a woman and a man who are in love, and the man dies. And during it was made in the '40s. Obviously, during the war, the guy dies in combat. A guy named Joe, and then in the '80s or '90s, it was a little bit weird because there wasn't a war going on. But anyway, it's this thing about, and then the guy's dead, and he's talking to her, or I don't know if he's talking to her, but yeah, I think he's talking to her, kind of. And then this other guy's hitting on her, and then the dead guy having a in love triangle with a dead guy. Anyway, I'm going on too much here. She very last performance, and I think she was already sick during that, and she kind of a cameo role. It was not a big role. She was in this Always, and she was very lovely. She was in her 50s and still very lovely older woman. And then she died. She had cancer, and she died, I think, soon after that. So I think in the mid '90s, I think she died, and it's tragic. Tragic. People die, but it's. She seemed like a very nice person. She seemed like a very lovely person. That's all the and you never know with actors. You just honestly never know. But that definitely was her persona, and she, I think, kept that persona up. So hopefully, it does mean that she was a nice person. Gene Hackman, yes. Unfortunately, to be honest with you, I'm not a big mourner of people who die. I mean, it's unfortunate, like when somebody dies young, whatever, but 95-year-old guy dies, it's kind of too bad. I mean, it's just like, that's what happens. People die, and it's time to move on. It's a little sad to hear that the circumstances, may not have been the best way to go out, but who am I to say? I don't know. And I don't even really know what happened. He was I should mention, he's 95 years old. It's kind of time to go. But he was a great actor. Let's just say that. He was a great actor. He won an Academy Award for French Connection. I'll say, of all his films, The Conversation. If you ever seen The Conversation? The Conversation is one of those films. It's very quiet, boring, very, very quiet. He plays this very kind of troubled man, very, very quiet, and he carries that movie because that type of movie, it's all in his face. It's all in what he says. It's all in what he doesn't say. If you don't have a competent actor doing that, he's fantastic in that. I'm sure he was nominated for that award, but he would have lost probably to not Brando, but no, it was the same year as Godfather 2. So whoever won that year, maybe it was Nicholson for China. No, Chinatown didn't win. I don't know who that would have been that year, but anyway. Fantastic movie. I'll recommend that. So Gene Hackman, he was in a lot of great movies. Mississippi Burning and Hoosiers and on and on and on. His last movie, I guess, was a kind of a forgettable movie, which is, I always kind of like, really, that's going to be your last movie. Why don't you go out on a high point? But, whatever. He took the role in this, So he actually is one of those people who actually did retire. I mean, a lot of them didn't. A lot of them just kind of keep going until they die, but he did actually make the decision to stop. So, all right. So I'm being told to wrap it up and talking way too much here. So Yeah, give me the universal. Shut up. Let's get on. So anyway, so I hope I did justice to Audrey Hepburn. She's a lovely woman. And so I will sign off. I'll say thank you for watching this episode. And we are extremely unhappy that Brian didn't get a word in edgewise, even though he was feeding me things all along the way on the side. So yes, so throw out your microphone and get a new one, and we will see you next week. What are we going to do? I guess we will talk. Oh, you want to figure something out now? All right. So let's see. Next week we got Audrey Hepburn. Let's do. What are you looking at? You want to do more Kurosawa? All right. Didn't we do Kurosawa already? All right. We can do that. So next week we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite Japanese director, Akira Kurosawa. Now I ask you to name another Japanese director, but so we'll see you next week. He out his audio problem, so by then he'll have it figured out. So, all right, good.